Despite what Kyrie Irving says, the earth is not flat, but the NBA is, and it's why the Jazz depth matters more than ever. Plus, Tim LaComb on the summer or the offseason interview series, all coming up on today's Locked On Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Today, we'll look at how the NBA has flattened. How many teams actually have a differential over 8 like the dominant teams once did, over 5, or even just over 2? It's much different than it ever once was. Plus, we'll look at last year's breakout team, the Sacramento Kings, and where they ranked compared to where they would have ranked in years past to show you the flattening and then how this impacts the Utah Jazz and why their depth might matter more. Tim LaComb, radio studio analyst for the Utah Jazz, joins us for the interview series as well. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Everydayers, I adore you. Thank you very much for being here each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, available on YouTube. Chat up in the YouTube room. You do great stuff. Appreciate that very much. And thanks to Tim LaComb, T. LaComb on Twitter for joining us. Please send a thank you to Tony and Sarah and Thurl and Ben Anderson. Everybody's joined us on the summer interview series this year. Greatly appreciate all of them. All right, let's get to it. So last year, the Sacramento Kings were the surprise team of the NBA, and their differential, their offensive efficiency minus their defensive efficiency, which is always kind of the best way to look at a team and project where they are, is their differential. More than their win-loss record, kind of it's a great indicator. Win-loss is what matters, but so Sacramento wins 48 games last year. They're the surprise team of the league, and their differential was a 2.6 last year. Last year, there were 6 teams with a differential over 3. The Denver Nuggets were a 3.3. It's one of the lowest differentials ever for an NBA champion, and yet they were the second best differential in the West last year at 3.3. Memphis was the best at 4.0. The West particularly was down. Put this in perspective. Memphis was number 1 at 4.0. They would have been 4th the year prior. Go to pre-COVID 18-19 year, and with a 4 differential in the West, they would have been the 6th best team in the West, or they would have been tied with Denver behind Golden State, Utah, Houston, and Portland in 18-19. This is Memphis was number 1 in the West last year at a 4.0. And if you go back to the 17-18 season, the Warriors and the Jazz and the Thunder would have all been better than them. They would have been 4th. It's a dramatically go back to the 15-16 season. We're now pretty far back, but you literally have the Spurs and the Warriors at over plus 10, and the Thunder at plus 7, and the Clippers at plus 4.5 before you get to a team that's plus 4 like Memphis, who was the number 1 differential team in the West. Probably a note that's important when kind of projecting the season. People seem to have forgotten that about Memphis. Denver was the second best at 3.3. And then Sacramento was the 3rd best differential in the Western Conference last year at 2.6. And they were only 2 points off or 3 points off the second best team in the league in differential. Cleveland was the second best differential in the NBA last year at 5.6, like a crazy low number. Boston was the only team over 6 last year in the NBA at 6.7. And then you decide what you think of their move to add Kristaps Porzingis for Marcus Smart. Same thing you can decide with Memphis at 4.0. So those are that is a flatter NBA than we've ever seen. Let me show you how. So if we just go back a year, this is where the trend started. We at least had 3 teams over 6. Utah, Boston, and Phoenix. Phoenix at 7, Boston at 7, and Utah at 6. Sacramento at 2.6 1 year prior, instead of being 8th, would have been 11th. And they would have been 5 off the second best team instead of 3 points. We go to pre-COVID to 18-19. And the best teams, again, are Milwaukee's at a 9 at this point. And Sacramento, instead of being 8th best in the NBA, would have been 11th best at 2.6. And they would have been 4 off instead of 3 off the second best team. There was a pretty big gap that year. We go to 15-16, just slide down 3 years in sample size to see where we are. We would have had 2 teams I mentioned earlier over 10, Oklahoma City over 7, Cleveland over 6. And we finally would have gotten down with a little more top heavy. You would have gotten down to Sacramento at their 2.6. They would have been 10th, but they would have been 8 points per 100 possessions off the second best team in the league instead of 3. It's a flattening of the league when you look at these teams. In the 12-13 season, we're dropping kind of 3 years at a time. The top best teams were Oklahoma City at a 10, Miami at an 8, Clippers at a 7, San Antonio at a 6.7, Denver at a 5. And so Sacramento would have been the 10th best team in the league instead of the 8th, and they would have been 6 points per 100 possessions off the second best team instead of 3. So you can see that's 10 years ago. That's the flattening that's taken place in this league right now. And it's impactful. It means as we're projecting these teams and trying to look at what they may or may not be, and we look at the Jazz and we try to figure out, well, where do the Jazz rank and how do we view the Jazz? And we try to break down, I did my Northwest Division preview on Real GM Radio, as I do every year with Adam Morris and Danny LaRue. And I just think it's so flat, right? Like, I think Minnesota is going to play a home playoff game, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. Like, I think they're just a notch better than like the tiniest amount. And if one thing happens, it swings the whole thing. But sure, Denver's the best team in the league, and Memphis is probably going to be right there in differential, and Phoenix should be really good. But like, the difference we're talking about is so minuscule. In fact, last year there wasn't a single team over 8. In 2021, there wasn't a single team over 8. What this is the previous collective bargaining agreement having its first wave of impact on the NBA and the balance and the parity of the league. And now we have a new collective bargaining agreement, which is even more severe on teams at the top and what they're doing. And so this is going to shrink it even more. Like, this is a trend that started, and as I've talked about before, had it not been for the kind of weird salary cap spike that allowed Kevin Durant to sign with the Warriors, I think we would have had like 9 champions in the last 10 years. Like, the Warriors, Oklahoma City would have probably won a title in there. Thank God they didn't. And then move from there, you would have had, Denver last year, you just would have different champions. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing this kind of parity of the league. It's going to get even more severe with the rules this year of what the collective bargaining agreement is doing to the top teams and how they can and can't re-sign players. So I'm talking about a trend that's backwards. The future trend is going to be even shrinking this even more. If you look at last year, we had 2 teams over 5 and 9 teams with a differential over 2. This is incredible to me. A differential over 2 is not much. Generally, we think of a point per 100 possessions as 2.7 wins. Okay? So if you're 2.2 over, you're like, it's about 5. Right? That's about a 47 over 41. Like, it's about a 5. It's about a 46 win team, right? 41 and 41 should be 0. 2.7 plus 2.7 is about 5. Close, right? 5.4. And so that should be 46 wins. Not like, we don't go crazy over 46 wins. There were only 9 teams last year with a differential over 2 in the NBA. The year before, there were 13. In 18-19, there were 11. In 17-18, there were 10. In 16-17, interestingly, there were only 8. It was a particularly top-heavy year. 13-14, doing this kind of 3-year jump, there were 12. And 10-11, there were 11. And we're down to 9 teams that actually have a differential over 2. Teams with a differential over 5, like really dominant teams. Last year, there were 2. Year prior, there were 5. Year pre-COVID, there were 4. Then 3 in 17-18, 3 in 16-17, 4 in 13-14, 6 in 10-11, 2 last year. 0 teams over 8, 2 teams over 5, only 9 teams over 2. So when we look at the Utah Jazz this year, we try to figure out where they fit and who they are. The gap for them to jump people is smaller than it's ever been. It also means that there just aren't bottom-feeding teams that are terrible you're going to go beat every night, which is good for the league. But if Lowry Markkanen bursts, if the Jazz depth really matters, like when you start projecting, Denver does not have 240 minutes of NBA basketball on their roster. They do not have 240 minutes of NBA caliber rotation players on their roster. I'm not sure, but I think that the Golden State Warriors do either. You start looking at some of the top teams, and we're going to do this. We're going to do 240 as one of our preview segments coming up. As we're going through training camp and all that, we'll do all these previews and various things. You look at the Warriors. So Chris Paul, honestly questionable. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond, sure. Kevin Looney, Gary Payton, Jonathan Kuminga, maybe. Like, hasn't totally proven it. Moses Moody, maybe. Dario Saric, maybe. Corey Joseph, backup point guard, maybe. Those are questionable numbers of whether or not those are bona fide. And I think the Clippers have 240. The Lakers, Cam Reddish, that's not 240 to me. Christian Wood, probably not in my 240 after last year. They're a little short. They're close, but they're a little short. Derrick Rose for Memphis until John Morant gets back. That David Roddy, not Brandon Clark's out. Like, they're short. So when you suddenly look at Utah and you suddenly think, okay, we'll probably have 240 minutes of quality NBA rotation basketball between Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Lowry Markkanen, John Collins, Walker Kessler, Kelly Olynyk. I think Ojai counts. Talen Horton-Tucker probably counts close. Like, he's got to really still prove that. Earn it this year. We're close. Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks, that's going to be interesting, whether or not they can fill out the 240. And you suddenly have that depth that may matter more than it ever has. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street. By the way, Tim LaComb coming up here in just a second. We're just getting started on the show today. It's going to be a great one. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also in Linden and in Logan. The Hyundai lineup of cars, absolutely outstanding. I'm driving one of the new Santa Fe's. Both my kids have a Santa Fe right now, and we did the research for the safety, size, dollar figure. It was a no-brainer. It was the Hyundai and the Santa Fe. The electric Santa Fe's have won all the awards. The car of the years, the Ioniq 6. The Motor Trend SUV of the years, the Ioniq 5. The lineup of the cars is amazing. The dollar value you get for the car, super. The Murdoch service, out of this world. It's what they call their no-regret system. They want to make sure you have no regrets. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com so that I can make sure that you get the Locked On VIP experience from Murdoch Hyundai and get you set up with that VIP meeting. So when you walk in, you know what you're going to get. You feel good about it, and you are as happy as can be. That's at Murdoch Hyundai, located in also in Logan and in Linden at 4646 South State Street. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. The NFL season is here. Get ready for the NFL season. America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel has a great offer for you. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All customers who bet $5 also get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app's easy to use. You can bet on everything from spreads to player props to more. You can visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. That's right. You get $50. You get $5. You get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket. You bet $5. You get $200 back in bonus bets. Plus, all the NBA props are up. We'll start looking at those coming up here in the upcoming weeks. Plus, you can get all the college football lines as well if you want to over at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Day 2 with Tim LaComb. I hope you enjoyed day 1. If not, it's available. It's on the YouTube playlist with all the off-season interviews we've done with Tony and Sarah and Thurl and all the rest. So make sure you grab it. And been fun. Ben Anderson joined us as well. Tim will be on the pre-halftime post-game show on the radio all year long. We'll start it off coming up here from Hawaii in our Maui strong tribute and fundraiser for Maui, and then we'll be in Seattle, and then we'll finally be home for a few as the season gets rolling. Firing up for it. All right, last episode we talked a lot about can you live without a point guard? Let's just pretend there is a point guard in this roster, and someone is going to be announced as Dan Roberts as the point guard or something of the sort. Who is it? And basically what I'm really asking you is, who are your starting guards on this team?
I think that, I really liked what I saw last year, given the minutes and the time we saw Chris Dunn. And I'll tell you a couple things. I thought he gained a ton of confidence as the year went on, but became a little bit more of a scoring threat. But I like his ability to break down defenses. He like, I guess THC and Colin, I think all three of these guys can really get somewhere on the floor and require somebody else to come, for different reasons. But to me, I like Dunn to start a game. I like Colin to kind of come in and kind of reinforce that toughness and pressure. And then to me, THT's kind of your wild card, kind of a guy who, like last year, where they'd throw him in there with perhaps when things got stagnant. And I'll promise you this much, something's going to happen when he gets in there. We saw that time and time again, and he made a play every night, it seemed, that was like, wow, to me. Just something completely, whether it be a pass, his vision, way he finished something. He just was a wow guy. So I kind of would put him in that order.
All right, so are you starting Jordan with Chris Dunn then?
I actually would probably start Jordan and bring Ochai off the bench.
Okay. So let's play back and forth, just debate, hanging out, two guys.
Absolutely.
So Chris Dunn, still to me, I think of as a non-shooter.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're starting John Collins, but assuming for the conversation you're suddenly starting Chris Dunn, John Collins, and Walker Kessler. Is that enough shooting?
Shooting's everything, spacing's everything, as Majerus said. Spacing is offense, and offense is spacing.
Nice.
And it really is true. I mean, this at the time I didn't fully understand, but as I've sat and watched offense, it is all about space and what creates space shooting. I think Collins is a better three-point shooter and a threat than perhaps we've seen, and definitely from last year, was he 29%?
Yeah.
So it's going to be better than that. And I think we talked about reasons why last time. I think he's going to get cleaner looks. But it does bring up a point. It won't be as free-flowing per se. But I think that's probably where you start and then kind of adjust from there.
Okay. I'm of belief I want either Colin Sexton or Jordan Clarkson on the floor for all 48 minutes. I want one or the other on the floor for all 48 minutes. Are you with me on that?
Yes.
So if Clarkson is starting, do you have Ochai getting the backup 2 minutes behind Jordan?
Yes.
What is Ochai's role this year?
3 and D. I think it's 3 and D. I think really, I think this year's team really needs him to lock in and really prove that he can be that really great defender that guards, has a really difficult matchup on the wing every night. Because I'm telling you, man, you saw him this summer. His body's ready for that.
Yeah, great.
So I think he looked great. He shot the ball so much better. But I think, you don't want to put him in a box, but I think that's what this team really needs him to be. At least to start the season and just creating opportunities with his energy.
What was your feeling on his summer league? I thought his body looked great. There was a part of me that, considering he spent 5 years at Kansas, that I wanted him to be maybe more dominant than he was at times in that summer league. Or am I asking more than was fair out of him?
Yeah, I get there too. And I think the way I've kind of dealt with it is, that summer league is so new for so many guys. And you put a guy with experience out there and it's almost like going to a movie you've seen 3 times. You know what's coming, but
like Barbie.
Exactly. You've seen Barbie a few times. you know what's coming, but the guy, someone next to you that's at the show that doesn't, they're going to be a little slower to react. And so I think there's some of that. Obviously, I think he had moments where he looked great. I think he had moments where he struggled, but I think that's where he is in his career. And I do think that his unique ability, to come into games and find himself. The summer league, there were a couple of games where things didn't go well for him at all. And he was able to kind of dig himself out and finish the game with pretty respectable outing. And so I think he's a guy that just goes out there, kind of takes what comes easy. And I think that's why 3-and-D will really be important for him this year. I think that's a way he can really impact this team.
His year last year is so interesting, right? Like he just develops for 41 games. Then we put him in the lineup kind of out of nowhere. It's pretty limited. Then he does well. Then we don't just put him in the lineup. Then we just literally threw him. We took the floaties off and we threw him in the deep end. And frankly, he was not quite drowning, but he wasn't getting to the edge of the pool either. I mean, I think in the final 15, 20 games, I think he shot about 37, 38% and about 30% from three. We put a lot on his plate, probably more than was a script by which he could actually be successful. So those numbers don't bother me at all. The same thing, we'll talk about it later, but Keontae, I expect to have that kind of year this year. That's just, it's too hard to be 19. So I'm not my point on Ochai is that part. I just think it's interesting, right? They threw him all the way into the deep end. So if I asked you, what do you think Ochai is as a player? Do you have a vision of how he fits 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
No, I think that actually, I think his ability to kind of grow his game will be what we see over the next couple of years. I mean, I have a vision for what I think he's really good at right now. But I've also...
what is, Will Hardy, say you have your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
What's Ochai's superpower? Sorry to interrupt you, but what's Ochai's superpower?
I think his superpower is that you can put him in a game, and you spoke of this completely out of the blue this last year, and he can look like he belongs. I mean, I think that guy, he's played enough basketball at a high enough level that you can throw him into a game, and there'll be times where you throw a young player into a game, and you can tell right away they don't belong out there. I think that he has one of those advantages, and part of it's because his body's so good, but I think he's got a great mind. I would say his single greatest ability is his ability to get to the next play, not dwell on some of the difficulty and negative. Last year, he went down to the G League for a spell. Sometimes that kills guys. You see guys never, as silly as it is, they have such a higher bar set for themselves, they can't deal with it. I think his ability to just get to the next play and the fact that he belongs, I think that's what makes him great now. But can he add to that? Can he be a guy that consistently goes out there and gets you 15 points a night? I think he's a guy that could do that. I think he's got that ability, but that's what we're going to be able to watch and see.
Who has a better superpower, Colin Sexton or Talen Horton-Tucker?
So Colin Sexton to me is bulldog. That's what I label him as. His approach is just attack. Defensively, you attack your opponent. Offensively, you attack your opponent. And THC has kind of that wow factor. Just as I told you, there were times last year where there's no possible way he's going to make that. And as I'm saying it, he's making that play. I think they're both really unique, and that's why maybe this can all work, because every guy that comes out there has a little bit different, ability. But I would probably say, that the Colin Sexton bulldog will be something hopefully this team can latch onto. And maybe that's something that he can bring more out of guys, that bulldog, that attack mentality.
He's Tim LaComb, pre-halftime post-game show host for the Jazz Radio Network. We love having him on with us. We'll continue with Tim here, talk about the rookies and what their role will be. I also left a question out from day one that we get to, and answer the question about those guitars. We'll do all of those things as we continue here with Tim. Reminder, by the way, everybody, Locked On Fantasy Basketball is previewing the season and getting you ready for the upcoming year with Josh Lloyd, so make sure you grab a hold of that. We're not done yet. More with Tim LaComb coming up. Today's show brought to you by Jase Medical. That's Jase Medical. Jase Medical wants to make sure that you don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivered and ongoing consultation and care. So let's think about this for a second. So here's how it works. Storm, shortage, pandemics, supply chain issues, whatever it might be, you end up short. You need your antibiotic. You need something. And Jase Medical is simple and has you prepared. You go online, you fill out a form, and then you get prescription life-saving medications right to your door. Jase Case, it gives the peace of mind so that you are not just hoping you have access to medication in emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics from Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on Jase Medical, Jase medical.com. That's Jase medical.com. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. And that's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. Provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use, gives you a peace of mind so that you are not hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase makes sure you have medication on hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy, medication delivery, and ongoing consultation care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using Locked On at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. Promo code Locked On.
Let's tell the story about the guitars before we get into the rookies. So why do you have 5 super cool guitars behind you?
So in my youth, I was in a rock and roll band in high school, David, and in Plano, Texas, started a band called the Party Hounds. And this was a way we made money through high school. We'd play parties and gigs and school dances and things like that. Well, we put that all on the shelf for some time. And about 10, 15 years ago, we all kind of got a wild hair to meet up in Austin again and play. And ever since we've played 5 or 6 times in the last 3 or 4 years. Pretty cool shows. Played a couple shows in Utah this year. And I just have become now, basketball is kind of what a lot of people know me for, but music's kind of my passion now. And I learned to play the guitar self-taught, bought a bunch of these guitars at pawn shops through the years, and have just saw a good deal and got it. But this one over here that's signed by ZZ Top.
Strong.
Yeah, that's a cool one too that I got when they came out here and played a show. So thanks to my buddy Steve Wynn, he got me that one. So anyway, just you'll find me most times down in this room, watching tape, sorting baseball cards, and listening to music.
I think you did a show. When was it? I was in Scotland, so that was probably in. Was that June of this year? You guys had a big show in Salt Lake?
We actually did 2 shows in Provo in September.
Okay.
Or excuse me, in August. I'm sorry.
August. Yeah.
August 4th and 5th. So it was awesome. Had a really good turnout. Had a bunch of listeners come.
Love it.
It was cool.
All right. Let's talk about the rookies. I use the Ochai Agbaji model on Taylor Hendricks and then got a bunch of kickback from listeners when I've brought this up to Sarah or Tony or Ben or others. People don't seem to think it's that strange, so maybe it wasn't. But one of the things on Taylor that I think is super interesting is that he really has never been the man on his team, right? In his high school or his AAU team, and even last year he didn't take the most shots on that team. I think I would like to see him spend a lot of time in the first half of the season in the G League getting the ball and being the man. Like when I play with rotations with him, unless he does something incredible at camp, he's 19 years old, I think it's unlikely. I just can't see him get more than 4 to 5 minutes a half at a time. And so fine, it's good for him to get those 10 or 12 minutes in the NBA game, but I'd really like to see him go get 30 minutes a night with Woj and down in the Salt Lake Stars with the ball in his hands and have him play the role of Lowry and give him the ball. What's your thought on that?
You think like a coach because, the alternative is he plays more minutes, which is, perhaps good. But at the expense of who, and one of the guys that I absolutely love on this team, I take a lot of stuff from it, but I just know how he impacts winning, and that's KO. A guy that just, you talk about not having to have a point guard. A big reason is because he's the ultimate distributor from his position, a la he like Jokic. He doesn't pass quite like him, but I'm telling you, big time facilitator. So I think you play more Taylor, you have, who you're going to take off the floor. It's going to be Collins. It's going to be Olynyk. And I just think we're at a place where those guys probably need to play. But we'll see. I mentioned his versatility defensively really excites me. But the be-all, end-all, to improvement, and on the eve of your daughter's playing in a tournament this week, and you can speak to this, but it is reps. It is getting out and getting reps. You don't get better watching other people do. You get better understanding, hey, when I've got the ball and the double team comes from the top side, I've got to take one release dribble this way. I mean, you have to, it's one thing to see it. It's one thing to be taught it, but it's another thing to constantly go get reps. And so I'm with you on his development, whatever he's going to be able to get the most reps. And where we sit right now, I would say that would be probably in the G League.
When you watched his Central Florida film, like you watch him on the floor, it's like, okay, I'll take him. Like I want him now. You watch him jump, I want him now. You watch him block a shot from the weak side, like I want him now. What did you think of his overall feel for the game?
It's growing, but you said it. This is a guy who, I mean, you get a lot of guys that are drafted in the first round after 1 year of college they're so seeped in business already, and they already know the ins and outs because they've been the best player in their age for so many years that you're inheriting kind of an entity unto itself. This kid, as you said, he kind of snuck up on the process. I heard Johnny Dawkins talk about the fact that I don't think anybody's more surprised than him that last year, got on the track that it did, and he was able to, after 1 year, go to the NBA because it was never in the cards. That was never anything that anybody ever talked about associated with him. So I think that there's actually some real promise there because
let me jump in and interrupt you. Put your coach's hat on.
Yeah.
Is like a guy who's never been the man by 19 years old. Does that mean that there's a whole nother chapter of this book that can be written, or is that actually problematic that hasn't been developed by then?
I think that it's actually, honestly, I think it's refreshing. And I think a coach would almost see it that way because there is so much now of trying to navigate how you have, you got 13, 14 guys on your team, all claiming to be the man or having been. I think there actually is some real value in having guys sneak up on the process, and just by virtue of how good they actually have played as opposed to their hype machine. I think there's some real good in that. And I think you'll watch a guy right there that'll probably just attract knowledge like a sponge. This guy is going to listen closely and take every advantage because, again, this was not in his plans. A lot of guys, like Keontae George, I'm sure that, him playing in the league pretty soon after college was going to be in the plan from the time the kid was very, very young. Taylor Hendricks was probably thinking about what job he was going to take. And all of a sudden, here he is in the NBA, and I think it's cool.
What did you like most about Keontae in Summer League?
How definitive and deliberate he was about attacking and playing, on attack. I think sometimes you see guys get out there and try to protect, their reputation per se, but this guy just went out there and laid it on the line. And I liked that he was, some games he was pretty unstoppable. I used this with a couple of people after watching him, but he seems to have a lot of those similar qualities to Jordan Clarkson. If his shoes are laced up, no matter where you throw him in the game, he's going to go out and instantly go get you buckets or attack the basket in a way that'll hopefully get you buckets or get you to the line because he plays on a direct line. I know he's had some struggles finishing around the rim in his time in college, and that'll be something to watch. But to me, I think he seems to be a quick study, and his ability was really fun. When he got it going, it was almost like, a little bit of Clarkson when he gets it going.
I don't know how much you watched him at Baylor and having coached as many years as you did in college. Do you have any insight into, I don't know, I don't want to ask you like their team chemistry because there's no way for you to know unless you were there, right? So, but it felt to me kind of funky, right? There were these veteran guards, and he suddenly had to become the third guard, and he had to get bigger. And he had like these nights early in the year where he dropped 30, and they went on, I think, a European tour, and he was dominant. It felt to me like just watching a little bit as like I watched probably 8 of their games, maybe not, maybe more, but you watch early and then you'd watch late. Like it felt to me like there was almost a resistance on the roster to letting Keontae George be Keontae George, if that makes sense. Like that, did I make that up in my head, or does that happen on college teams?
No, I think it happens. I think probably even more so. I mean, I'm now 4 years removed from them paying guys a lot of money. At Baylor, they're making pretty good money to play. Those guys are getting good money. So obviously, that jockeying for position takes on a whole new meaning. I saw NIL coming down the road, and it was hard enough to limit playing time based on ability. But when you start to throw cash on top of that and knowing, hey, we're going to sit a guy that's making more than, I wouldn't even want to go down that road. So, I sensed a little funky too, to be honest with you. And I didn't know, watching from a distance, sometimes his body language, I wasn't sure, what vibe I was getting. So it was actually really refreshing to watch how free he played. He really played free, but he played within himself. I didn't feel like he tried to go out there and do things he couldn't do.
What did you see out of Bryce Sensabaugh at Ohio State?
A really powerful guy, packs a load, and he's certainly a matchup nightmare, a guy that can kind of get you down there in that mid-post area and take the wrong guy to school. He gets the wrong matchup. He can really do that. Does a good job of playing isolation, direct line, being able to get to the basket. And again, I think his ability to finish in and around the rim will be the story. If he can figure out a way. He and Hendricks not being able to play this summer kind of puts him behind. So camp's going to be interesting to see how things evolve. But I sense that he'll be a guy that will get a lot out of the G League too. And we'll probably learn way more about him, further into the season based on what he's able to do and accomplish down there.
He's kind of the opposite of Hendricks. Hendricks, I want to have him go to the G League so he learns how to take the ball, not play with teammates. And Sensabaugh, I need to have go to the G League to learn how to play with teammates.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's kind of a funny.
No, but that's what that thing's there for. I mean, I can promise you this, there's lots of guys that come with, you'd wish that everybody had that same skill set, but everybody's at a different place in their journey. Some guys do things better than others, but that's why that G League and the proximity here in Salt Lake is so ideal, because you have that ability to, even if they get sent down, they're here and you're working with them. And I've seen that, the Jazz do an unbelievably great job with that.
He's Tim LaComb. He'll be with us tomorrow, or coming up one more time later this week, and we'll break down the front court, how John Collins fits. Does he see John Collins taking the Lauri Markkanen jump? What does he see from Lauri Markkanen in the next year? How do you do that rotation? And then we'll look at the Western Conference as well. It's all coming up on Locked On Jazz, here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, later this week.
We're not done yet. More with Tim LaComb coming up. Today's show brought to you by Jase Medical. That's Jase Medical. Jase Medical wants to make sure that you don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivered and ongoing consultation and care. So let's think about this for a second. So here's how it works. Storm, shortage, pandemics, supply chain issues, whatever it might be, you end up short. You need your antibiotic. You need something. And Jase Medical is simple and has you prepared. You go online, you fill out a form, and then you get prescription life-saving medications right to your door. Jase Case, it gives the peace of mind so that you are not just hoping you have access to medication in emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics from Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on Jase Medical, JASE medical.com. That's JASE JaseMedical.com. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. Provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use, gives you a peace of mind so that you are not hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase makes sure you have medication on hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy, medication delivery, and ongoing consultation care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using Locked On at checkout on JaseMedical.com. That's JASE Medical.com. Promo code Locked On.